A chill fog clung to the banks of the Thames in Putney, a small village west of London, where in 1485 a boy was born who would one day wield more power than most could imagine. Thomas Cromwell entered the world as the youngest of 3 children in a household ruled not by nobility, but by pragmatism and violence. His father, a blacksmith and brewer, was a man of many trades, but also a man who courted the law for assaults and quarrels. In that turbulent environment, Cromwell inherited a sense of relentless ambition, a hunger to rise above circumstance, and a capacity for ruthlessness that would define his later career. Growing up amid the clamor of hammer on anvil and the pungent smell of malt, Cromwell learned early that life favored the bold and the cunning. His father's brushes with the law, including a conviction in 1477 for assault, cast long shadows. The young Thomas internalized both the brutality and the shrewdness he witnessed, honing a mind that would navigate the treacherous waters of Tudor politics decades later. This was a boy who understood that survival required intelligence, adaptability, and, when necessary, cruelty. At 18, restless and ambitious, Cromwell left England in 1503, seeking fortunes beyond the familiar banks of the Thames. He first enlisted as a mercenary in the French army, a life of violence and camaraderie, yet one he quickly abandoned, repelled by its harsh discipline and crude routine. Italy, however, offered a different world. In Florence, he entered the household of Francesco Frescobaldi, a wealthy merchant whose residence was frequented by luminaries of the Renaissance, including Michelangelo. Here, Cromwell absorbed not just commerce, but culture, politics, and the subtleties of influence. The streets of Florence, alive with art and intellect, left an indelible mark. Cromwell returned to England around 1512, carrying the seeds of sophistication that would later make him indispensable to kings. Back in London, Cromwell set up as a merchant, but commerce alone could not contain his ambitions. He turned to law, recognizing it as a vehicle for power. By 1514, he married Elizabeth Williams, a widow whose father had served Henry VIII. Their union produced 3 children, though tragedy soon struck. Within a year, Elizabeth and the daughters succumbed to illness, leaving Cromwell bereft. He would never remarry. Settling in Fenchurch Street, a hub for merchants, he continued to sharpen his legal acumen. Law offered him a ladder, and Cromwell climbed swiftly, gaining both wealth and influence in a city where status was fluid and opportunity abundant. Cromwell's rise was aided by a pivotal alliance with Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, then Henry VIII's chief minister. Wolsey, a man of similarly humble origins, saw in Cromwell a reflection of his own ambition and intellect. Appointed to Wolsey's council in 1519, Cromwell became a trusted legal advisor, executing complex tasks, including the dissolution of smaller religious houses to fund an Oxford college. These experiences were formative. He observed the leverage of wealth, the pliability of law, and the vulnerability of power. When Wolsey failed to secure the king's annulment from Catherine of Aragon, Cromwell's loyalty never wavered, earning him Wolsey's affection and respect, even in the cardinal's fall from grace. Through these early years, Cromwell learned that survival in Tudor politics depended on strategic alliances. He navigated loyalty and ambition with precision, understanding that service to a greater power could be both a shield and a weapon. Wolsey's eventual disgrace, while catastrophic for many, left Cromwell poised to seize the opportunities that Henry VIII's court would soon present. His ability to observe, adapt, and manipulate circumstances marked him as a figure destined to rise far beyond his modest birth. By the early 1520s, Cromwell's legal expertise and shrewd mind had positioned him as a man to watch. He had seen the fragility of the church, the volatility of royal favor, and the vast riches that came from controlling both. The dissolution of minor religious houses was a lesson in how faith and fortune could be entwined. And in Cromwell, the seeds of religious reform and ruthless pragmatism were already germinating. These early experiences were not mere preparation. They were the crucible in which the future architect of England's Reformation was forged. From a fog-shrouded village by the Thames to the bustling streets of London and the cultured palaces of Florence, Thomas Cromwell had transformed from an ambitious youth into a figure of rising influence. But the true stage for his genius and his eventual tragedy lay within the corridors of royal power, where loyalty, manipulation, and survival intertwined. The next chapter would follow Cromwell as he steps into the orbit of Henry VIII, navigating intrigue, alliance, and the dangerous favor of a king whose affections could shift as quickly as the winds. The corridors of Whitehall were alive with whispers, scheming courtiers, and the glint of ambition. It was here, in the heart of Henry VIII's court, that Thomas Cromwell would transform from a skilled lawyer and loyal servant into one of the most feared and influential men in England. With eyes that saw through pretense and a mind attuned to opportunity, Cromwell's rise would be rapid, calculated, and in many ways unstoppable. But it would also sow the seeds of envy, hatred, and eventual ruin. By the late 1520s, Cardinal Wolsey, once the most powerful man in England next to the king, had fallen from favor. His inability to secure Henry's annulment from Catherine of Aragon left him exposed, isolated, and vulnerable. Many of Wolsey's supporters fled, but Cromwell remained, not out of blind loyalty, but strategic calculation. He understood the fragile currents of court politics. To survive, one must bend without breaking. In Wolsey's final days, Cromwell acted as both advisor and intermediary, demonstrating a shrewd blend of discretion, efficiency, and legal acumen that would soon catch the king's attention. Cromwell's first official steps into royal service were subtle, yet decisive. Tasked with petitioning Henry VIII to pardon Wolsey, he impressed the king not only with his loyalty, but with his intellect, wit, and unflinching resolve. Henry, a man both magnetic and mercurial, recognized in Cromwell a mind capable of executing his will with precision, and a temperament that could withstand the dangerous tides of court intrigue. The young minister's reputation as a lawyer who could navigate the law, the church, and the labyrinthine structures of power made him indispensable. Cromwell's legal knowledge became his greatest weapon. He was instrumental in managing the king's great matter, Henry's desperate pursuit of an annulment from Catherine of Aragon. Through painstaking research, careful argumentation, and a keen understanding of canon law, Cromwell orchestrated the legal groundwork that allowed Henry to challenge papal authority. This was more than mere administration. It was political engineering at the highest level, and it earned Cromwell not only royal favor, but also enemies among those who feared his growing influence. By April 1532, Cromwell's rise was formalized. He became master of the jewels, a position granting control over vast wealth and access to the intimate spaces of the Tower of London. From there, his accumulation of offices was relentless. Each title, each appointment, further centralized power in his hands. By the mid-1530s, historians estimate that Cromwell's influence translated into an annual income equivalent to £3.5 million today, a staggering figure that placed him among the wealthiest and most powerful men in the kingdom. Cromwell's genius and infamy became most visible in the dissolution of the monasteries. Following Henry VIII's break with Rome in 1534 and his declaration as supreme head of the Church of England, Cromwell engineered the systematic dismantling of England's monastic institutions. These were not mere religious reforms. They were acts of political and financial revolution. Monasteries, symbols of papal power and reservoirs of immense wealth, were seized, their lands redistributed, and their occupants, from abbots to servants, often left destitute. Resistance was met with brutal force. Executions of dissenting clergy and the crushing of uprisings like the Pilgrimage of Grace in the north underscored the stakes of defiance. Cromwell had become the king's hand in reshaping England, wielding power that few dared challenge. Power, however, came with moral and personal costs. Cromwell's orchestration of Anne Boleyn's downfall in 1536 cemented his reputation for ruthless efficiency. Tasked with ending the king's second marriage, Cromwell engineered a case of treason, adultery, and incest, implicating Anne and several men, including her own brother George. Arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London, Anne faced her fate. On May 19, 1536, her life ended within those stone walls, while Cromwell observed. His loyalty to Henry was unyielding, yet it was a loyalty achieved through manipulation, strategic calculation, and the cold execution of justice, or what the king deemed justice. Following Anne's execution, Cromwell swiftly aligned with Jane Seymour, Henry's third queen, further solidifying his position at court. He became not only a political architect, but also a personal advisor trusted to navigate the volatile affections of the king. Yet cracks were beginning to appear. While Cromwell's administrative genius was unquestioned, his influence made him a target. The Pilgrimage of Grace, a northern rebellion, specifically vilified Cromwell, portraying him as the manipulative power behind the throne. Henry, ever sensitive to whispers of treachery, was forced to balance his reliance on Cromwell with the perception of his subjects' discontent. Cromwell's reach extended beyond England. He sought to forge alliances through marriage diplomacy, orchestrating Henry's union with Anne of Cleves in 1539 to strengthen ties with Protestant Germany. A portrait by Hans Holbein had convinced Henry of her beauty. Yet when the king met Anne, disappointment ignited his wrath. Cromwell, despite being made Earl of Essex, found himself vulnerable. His enemies seized upon the opportunity, spreading rumors of treason and deceit. Henry, increasingly paranoid and easily influenced, ordered Cromwell's arrest. A stark reminder that favor in Tudor England was both priceless and perilously fragile. In the span of barely 2 decades, Thomas Cromwell had risen from a Putney blacksmith's son to the king's most trusted minister, reshaping England's religious, political, and financial landscape. He had orchestrated annulments, engineered executions, and redefined the power of the crown. Yet even the mightiest towers cast shadows, and Cromwell's enemies, long patient, were poised to strike. The stage was set for a downfall as sudden and dramatic as his ascent, a fall that would lead him from the pinnacle of power to the scaffold of the Tower of London. The wind whipped along the River Thames, carrying whispers of betrayal through the streets of London. Thomas Cromwell, once the king's closest advisor, now walked a far darker path. The man who had orchestrated marriages, dissolved monasteries, and controlled wealth beyond imagining had suddenly become vulnerable, his enemies circling like wolves. In the volatile court of Henry VIII, favor was fleeting, and power could vanish overnight. Cromwell's misstep with Anne of Cleves, the German princess he had chosen as the king's 4th wife, ignited the flames of resentment that would engulf him. Cromwell had negotiated the marriage with meticulous calculation, envisioning a strong Protestant alliance with Germany. He relied on Holbein's portrait of Anne, confident it would win Henry's approval. But when the king first set eyes on her in December 1539, his reaction was fury. "She is nothing like the painting," he reportedly exclaimed, turning his disappointment into outrage. Cromwell, despite being the king's trusted servant, was blamed for the perceived deception. In Tudor England, a single misjudgment could destroy even the most loyal minister, and Cromwell's enemies seized the opportunity with merciless precision. Cromwell's ascent had always provoked jealousy. Nobles and courtiers, long resentful of a commoner wielding unprecedented influence, now struck with deadly efficiency. Rumors of treason and heresy began to circulate, painting Cromwell as a schemer plotting against the king. Henry VIII, easily swayed by fear and suspicion, signed the order for his arrest. Cromwell was imprisoned in the Tower of London, stripped of titles and publicly humiliated. His Order of the Garter was torn from him, a symbolic act of disgrace that marked the beginning of his final, inescapable descent. Cromwell's legal genius had once protected him from the courts, but now even the law became a weapon against him. His enemies persuaded Henry to bypass trial, introducing a Bill of Attainder in Parliament. This legal mechanism declared him guilty without the need for evidence or defense, a chilling reflection of Tudor power. By late June 1540, Cromwell was formally condemned. He wrote desperate letters from the Tower, pleading for mercy, but the king remained unmoved. His pleas were eloquent, reflecting both his skill with words and his awareness of the political theater around him, yet they failed to sway Henry, whose paranoia and temper were now fully aroused. Cromwell's fate was set, execution by beheading. Yet even in the shadow of death, he maintained his dignity, addressing his impending end with calculated humility. On July 28, 1540, he climbed the scaffold before a crowd of spectators, speaking not with fear, but with measured resolve. "I am come here to die, and not to purge myself, as some think peradventure that I will," he declared. He asked forgiveness of both God and the king, claiming that any offenses were unintentional and that his conscience remained aligned with divine truth. Even here, he demonstrated the irony and subtle defiance that had marked his career. The man who had dismantled monasteries and altered the religious landscape of England now faced his own mortality with a composed, almost defiant grace. Accounts of Cromwell's execution vary. Some chroniclers describe a clean, single stroke, while others claim the executioner struck multiple times, making the death ragged and brutal. Edward Hall's Chronicle suggests the latter, alleging that Cromwell patiently suffered the stroke of the axe by a ragged and butcherly miser, which very ungodly performed the office. Rumors even circulated that his enemies had bribed the executioner or encouraged him to drink, ensuring additional suffering. Following the beheading, Cromwell's head was displayed on London Bridge, a grim reminder to all of the perils of ambition and the ultimate reach of royal authority. Cromwell's life and death left a complex legacy. He had been a man of humble origins who rose to unprecedented power, a master of law, politics, and administration. He had helped Henry VIII reshape England, dissolve monasteries, and establish the Church of England. Yet his methods, ruthless, calculated, and often cruel, earned him hatred and fear. Even so, he protected his family through careful wording of his final statements and maintained his faith, leaving a record of conscience and conviction amidst a life of political maneuvering. In the aftermath, Henry VIII reportedly mourned Cromwell's loss. The king had executed not only a minister but a loyal servant and friend, and history suggests he later regretted the decision. Cromwell's death serves as a stark reminder of the fragile balance between favor and fortune in Tudor England, where brilliance and betrayal could exist in the same heart, and loyalty could be both weapon and curse. Thomas Cromwell's story ends on the scaffold, but the reverberations of his life echo through history. He reshaped the English church, amassed power unimaginable for a commoner, and navigated the perilous currents of Henry VIII's court with skill few could rival. Yet his fall exposes the danger inherent in ambition and influence, that the higher one climbs, the farther one can fall. The shadow of Cromwell's life is not just political. It is profoundly human, a tale of cunning, loyalty, and the ultimate price of power. The smoke from burning monasteries had long settled, and the stones of the Tower of London had grown cold. Yet the name of Thomas Cromwell echoed through England. A man born the son of a blacksmith in Putney had risen to become the architect of a king's will, the engine of religious reform, and the target of envy and hatred. His death on the scaffold was only the beginning of the questions history would ask. Was he a villain, a visionary, or a man shaped by the ruthless currents of Tudor politics? Cromwell's role in the English Reformation was transformative. Under his guidance, Henry VIII not only asserted supremacy over the church, but implemented reforms that reshaped the spiritual landscape of the nation. The dissolution of the monasteries redistributed wealth, undermined centuries-old religious institutions, and shifted the balance of power from Rome to the crown. Tens of thousands of monks, nuns, and servants were displaced, and while many decried Cromwell as a destroyer of faith, he simultaneously facilitated broader access to the Bible and religious texts. His support for translating the scriptures into English allowed the king and his court, once bound by Latin, to engage directly with the Word of God, cementing Cromwell's influence in shaping both faith and politics. Beyond religion, Cromwell revolutionized the machinery of English governance. He centralized authority, strengthened the bureaucratic structures of the monarchy, and demonstrated the potential for a skilled minister to influence law, finance, and diplomacy. His orchestration of royal marriages, management of revenues, and handling of rebellions showcased an administrative mind unparalleled in Tudor England. Even his enemies acknowledged his intelligence. The very mechanisms used to condemn him, legal expertise, parliamentary maneuvering, and political precision, were tools he had mastered during his rise. Yet Cromwell's legacy is inseparable from controversy. He was ambitious, manipulative, and at times ruthless, qualities that Henry VIII both admired and depended upon. He orchestrated the downfall of Anne Boleyn and other courtiers with cold efficiency, proving that loyalty to the king sometimes demanded moral compromise. Cromwell's life exposes the tension between service and self-preservation, between vision and cruelty. He navigated a court where the favor of the monarch could shift instantly, wielding power with precision while remaining acutely aware of the consequences of misstep. Cromwell's triumphs came at immense human cost. The dissolution of monasteries left thousands homeless and destitute. Executions and imprisonments spread fear throughout the land. His legal and political genius was inseparable from the suffering of those caught in the machinery of Tudor power. Even those closest to him were not immune. Anne Boleyn, George Boleyn, and many others fell victim to schemes Cromwell designed. His life, therefore, is not only a story of success, but also a reflection on the human price of ambition in an era defined by brutality, intrigue, and the absolute authority of the king. Historians have long debated Cromwell's character. Was he a visionary reformer, a loyal servant, or a political opportunist? The answer is complex. He combined vision with pragmatism, intellect with ruthlessness. His policies altered the course of English history, yet his methods often alienated those around him, leaving enemies eager to seize any opportunity for revenge. Even in death, his reputation was contested. Some saw a martyr of reform, others a villain of ambition. This duality has ensured that Cromwell remains one of the most fascinating and divisive figures of the Tudor era. Cromwell's influence extended far beyond his lifetime. The administrative reforms, religious restructuring, and centralized governance he championed continued to shape England for generations. The wealth seized from monasteries bolstered the crown's power, while the Reformation established a precedent for royal supremacy over religious matters. Politically, he demonstrated that talent and intellect could elevate a commoner to unprecedented heights, challenging the rigid social hierarchy of Tudor society. His life is a testament to what can be achieved through ambition, intelligence, and adaptability, but also a cautionary tale of how quickly fortune can turn in the perilous world of royal favor. Thomas Cromwell's story is both heroic and tragic. He rose from obscurity to shape a kingdom, only to fall victim to the very forces he once commanded. His execution on July 28, 1540, was dramatic, violent, and symbolic, a stark warning of the consequences of power and ambition. Yet his legacy endures, a man who wielded law, politics, and faith with unmatched skill, whose influence transformed England, and whose life reminds us that history is often written by those who survive and by those who fall in pursuit of greatness. Cromwell was, in every sense, a product of his time. Ambitious, intelligent, ruthless, and human. Though centuries have passed, the shadow of Thomas Cromwell remains. His reforms, his ambition, and his brutal efficiency continue to spark debate and reflection. In the echoes of monastery walls, in the annals of Tudor law, and in the corridors of history, Cromwell's presence is undeniable. He was a man who reshaped a nation, whose fall was as dramatic as his rise, and whose life stands as a testament to the precarious dance of power, loyalty, and human ambition in an era defined by kings, faith, and survival.